is Wisdom Wednesdays, and I'm going to be talking about magic in the mundane and my last week of my amazing and profoundly domestic magical aha moment. So this story is going to start with an invitation that I made for my ancestors to be with me. And so for any of you that do ancestral work or are not really sure what that means, for me, what that looks like right now is I have an altar that is kind of in a hutch behind glass. And this altar has pictures of ancestors and things that represent ancestors on my genetic bloodline and my husband's genetics bloodline. That's my whole family's lines. And on that altar, I have water and drink that I continue to keep fresh, and I always have fresh flowers, and along with a little seat and a little table. And so this is where I feed them, and I bring usually dinner offerings and tiny little morsels of things that I find delight in as they come. So there's my back context. And one of the things I do with this altar is I have a light that I turn on. And when I turn the light on to turn that altar light on, it's my way of symbolizing and declaring to the ancestors that I am actively engaged with them right now in a way of it, depending on what the intention is. So before I'm about to feed them, I'll turn the light on. I'll be like, hey y'all, I've got a meal coming, and I'll bring them the food. And then when I feel complete, I'll turn the light off. So that kind of differentiation for me of the light on and the light off actually helps me have some kind of imagery in this plane to remind me, okay, I'm in some kind of conversation with my ancestors. So what that ended up being one day was I was having a day where I'm like, you know what? I feel like I just need to receive from them. I feel like I don't have any offering I want to give. I feel like my offering is going to probably be in response to what I learned from them. And so I just turned their light on with that intention and asked my ancestors if there was any important message or medicine that I needed in that day. Just come on in. And sometimes there's like a glass door, so sometimes I'll like crack the door open so that they can, to show that they're like invited into my space even more so. And so that day I kind of like, with rituals, I slightly forgot that I had invited this whole ancestor flock to support me in that day. But all of a sudden I just something shifted in me, and I was moving through my house, and this like flurry, and for anyone popping on, we're talking about practical magic, a very domestic magic aha moment. And so as I started moving through my house, a flurry of energy came in, and I had this new perspective of cleaning. And so, of course, my grandmothers, these ancestors, are all like, we're going to teach you how to clean like how we cleaned. We're going to teach you how to tend a home like how we tended a home. And it's very, very different than, I'd say, my own modern perspective of what tending a home looks like. And I think also like coming from this lens of like the modern woman and, this schism of like domestic and housekeeper and stay-at-home mom, like all those different stories or archetypes that I actually have my own resistance to, kind of got washed away as the grandmothers came in and started schooling me on how to keep my house. So as this was happening, I noticed as the energy was flowing through my body, and I was choosing to move objects. I was choosing to clean in a way that was deeply devotional. And in that devotional act of like clearing up and moving these physical objects and tending my home, I started feeling it as a devotion to myself. I started feeling it as a devotion to my family. But moreover, I started seeing it as a way of claiming my belonging on this earth, claiming my commitment and my responsibility to being here in this physical plane. And they're showing me that as you're moving these objects, as you're tending those responsibilities that you have chosen in some way to have in your life, even if you're like me and I live with, I have a family of 5, so a lot of objects I have not consciously chosen. But this way of like, each time you touch them, you're actually engaging with the physical plane, and you're letting your energy turn what has because you're letting the physical plane become current. And what I mean by that, and this is something I've always felt a bit, is that like anytime somebody, just say you have a cup and you've had a yummy tea, you leave that cup. There's probably some of your friends that are like, leave 5 cups everywhere, all over the place, and just get another cup. It's like each time you put that cup somewhere, there's a thread of the past. So there's an action of the past that is now, it's almost like it's open. It's not completed. It's not wrapped up. And so the more things that you have physically in your space that are not kind of wrapped up, they actually become energetically like spider webs. And these spider webs become thicker and thicker and thicker in your home. And so what happens is the thicker the spider webs are, the more like cluster, the more like unfinished energy physically in the space, the harder it is, the more stagnancy you need to actually move through to allow yourself to feel current, to allow yourself to feel that you can actually go from now into, and even into the sense of a visioning mode, even into the sense of starting to consider having people over, like all these actions that represent moving forward can get really stuck and muddled when we have these objects that are visually showing our body that the past is still here physically. That old, that dinner plate from last night is still here. So dinner's still here, So they're kind of showing me, and these grandmothers were showing me this beautiful way of letting our relationship to the physical plane be a way of like tidying up the stagnation and the things that hold us back from moving forward. So there's my domestic magic. And I'd say since that day though, my house has been in a completely different experience. Everything is like clean, and this storyline of like, I won't be able to get to it. Like my house just has to be chaotic because I am a mother of like 3 kids and there's so many juggling, and I have 10 events all week throughout, to drive kids to. And it's just, but that story actually needs to get put on the shelf. And there's this reclaiming too of like, well, what's the story I want to tell myself and my children and show my family? So what are the side effects that I've noticed now that there's this new pulse and rhythm in myself that feels really nourishing and sourced from a healthy place? I think that's the important part here, is how do we keep this, like it could easily, and I've had a few times where I'm like starting to sway into this like anxious, like read-in place where I'm like, I have to clean, and just slowing down. I'm like, okay, take that energy away. Notice maybe where that's leaking, some part of me pulling that back. But I've noticed that I have more energy for all these other areas of myself. I have more ideas coming forth. I have the ability to invite opportunities into my home that I normally wouldn't, because I feel a little bit like, my house feels really like clunky and gross. I'm not like totally inspired to share it with anyone. So that's my feedback and my story for you. And so my invitation is to explore how working in this earthly plane can be very, very deeply nourishing and therapeutic, and open up a well of energy that is needed to move forward. And it's also a way to deeply create a stronger conversation with your relationship as a human here in this body, with the decisions you've made to have whatever items you have. And I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is this is a technique that I work really well with, which is the giveaway box. So like I have an area of my outside shed area where there's always there's a place for objects that whenever I see them when I'm cleaning, I'm like, okay, I don't need this anymore. My family doesn't need it. The moment I feel that, I bring it outside. So finding systems in your physical life that can move the energy as it's happening, instead of like, oh, I'll get back to that. I don't work that way. I work with like impulse and following that impulse directly. So have a beautiful day. Thank you all for watching, and until next, ciao.